say, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَصَبَرُوا. This is very important. They encouraged each other and counseled each other to the best of their ability, with sincerity, truthfully, to the truth and to the obligations that they owe. And Allah didn't continue by saying, and they were patient in doing so. He didn't just say they were patient. He went a step further and said, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, which teaches us something huge. Not only is sabr included now, meaning they were patient, they were perseverant, they remained constant, but they encouraged each other in remaining patient and constant and persevering. You know what that teaches us? You cannot keep your sabr. You need someone to counsel you and give you strength and say, listen, you need to have sabr. We need to feed, sabr feeds off of each other. You know, the strength comes from the other. You will lose heart on your own. It is a natural tendency of human beings when they're engaged in a frustrating situation. The most active of the Muslims, the most righteous of the Muslims, they're doing good things, and then somebody insults them, or somebody doesn't appreciate what they do, and bad things happen even in Islamic work, and they lose heart. The good people who know this better than I do, even then you have to go to that scholar, go to that imam, go to that activist, that da'i, that teacher, whoever he may be, and you have to go tell them, listen, you have to have sabr. And when you go and remind them in this way, does it benefit them? It does. Even though they already know this. Even though they already know about sabr. They still benefit from this kind of tawasi. So tawasi bis sabr is something that happens mutually. And this is something that happens, that is necessary for these things to have been met. And if we're not engaged, tawasi bil haqq may be to the adverse. And tawasi bil sabr is to those who are now trying to do tawasi bil haqq but losing heart. They're not seeing results among each other. How do they keep their strength going? By counseling each other with perseverance. Sabr, the way it's described in the most simple terms is ala al-masa'ib, meaning you have to be patient, perseverant, remain constant no matter how difficult things get. Wasbir ala ma asabak. Persevere no matter what calamity falls upon you. That's one meaning. The other is, anil ma'asi, meaning you will be tempted. Those who do work for this deen in any capacity, whether you're trying to serve this deen inside your house, outside, you're trying to do da'wah to non-Muslims, set up a charity, whatever you're trying to do for Islam, guess who shaitan's after? The people who are trying to serve this deen. So that he will tempt them with disobedience to Allah in their private moments more than anyone else. They are more susceptible. They are more under attack. So you have to have sabr from falling into disobedience to Allah. And then you have to have sabr on the obedience to Allah, meaning obedience to Allah can become difficult. And you have to remain perseverant. And you have to, there are among us, these are real stories. This is not some theory. Allah speaks to us, He talks about us, and He knows what kind of lives we lead. فِيهِ ذِكْرُكُمْ. And it is your own mention. There are brothers and sisters even who are very active in some Islamic activity. They're doing a lot of good things. But then they have some really bad habits. Really evil habits. And it's a problem. They're addicted to them. They need, what they need? They need tawasi bis sabr. They need somebody else constantly counseling them and saying, listen, you need to persevere. You need to hold on. The final few things I want to share with you in regards to the sequence of these 4 items. The first comment is all of these are mentioned in the past tense. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, past tense. وَعَمِلُوا, past tense. وَتَوَاصَوْا, all past tense. What's the benefit of that? What's the difference between saying that and saying إِلَّا الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ وَيَعْمَلُونَ الصَّالِحَاتِ وَيَتَوَاصَوْنَ بِالْحَقِّ وَيَتَوَاصَوْنَ بِالصَّبْرِ? Why not mention it in the present tense? Mentioning it in the past tense implies these are people who lived their entire life doing it, and until the moment they died. So you can look back at their entire life, and you'll be able to say, yes, they fulfilled the rights of Iman. Yes, when you look at their life, you say these people did good, and they did tawasi bil haqq, and they did tawasi bil sabr. In other words, this is almost a fulfillment of the ayah وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Don't you dare die except that you're Muslims. When you're looking back at their life, you don't say they used to be good and then they failed, tapered off. Until the end of their life, they were committed, so you can look back at them and say, they fulfilled all 4 of these things. So by mentioning them in the past, it is an illustration that their entire life represents these behaviors, until death came to them. These are the people. In other words, you can never just stop. You can never just look. You have to reach the point where you can look back, or people will look back at your entire life and be able to say, all these 4 conditions were met. This is the second benefit. And the final thing, and probably one of the most important things in regards to this discussion on Surat Asar, is the following. You know how the ba had several benefits? With haq, we talked about that. Similarly, when they do tawasi bis sabr, when they're encouraging each other, they're doing it with patience. They're doing it with patience. And when they're encouraging each other, they're doing it to patience. So what's the difference between saying, I'm advising you with patience, and I'm advising you to patience? And so this is two separate things. To patience and perseverance. The way in which I give you this counsel also requires patience. I have to be patient in giving this counsel to you. You can't just have sabr, brother. You have to be very patient, and you have to be very forbearing in dealing with people that are suffering from, or lack of obedience to Allah. You have to have counsel for them, right? You have to be patient with them in doing this kind of counsel to them. But also, what are you encouraging them to develop? Patience itself, themselves. So the way you deliver it requires patience, and what you're calling them to itself is a sabr, this constancy, this perseverance. Actually, there's one last thing that came in my head, and I should just mention it. These four things are a litmus test of each other. That's the last thing we'll say. These four things are a litmus test of each other. In other words, if somebody loses sabr, if somebody loses sabr, then they won't really be able to do tawasi bil haqq. Why not? Because as soon as they try to tell people the truth, people will say things they don't want to hear. And when people say things they don't want to hear, things get difficult. They will say, I don't want to deal with this. When you say, I don't want to deal with it, I'm walking away, I can't handle it, what is that a lack of? That's a lack of sabr. So the fact that someone doesn't encourage to the truth actually already illustrates there's a lack of sabr. There's a lack of sabr. And the other thing that this illustrates is somebody might think they're calling to the truth, but nobody has a problem with what they're saying. They think they're calling to the truth, but nobody's offended by what they have to say. Nobody gets up and gives them a hard time about it. You know what that means? That the fact that your apparent tawasi bil haqq didn't require sabr, you know what that means? You probably aren't doing tawasi bil haqq. Because the softest, most gentlest of people on the face of this earth, when they call to the truth, they got in trouble. They got in trouble. It is a necessary consequence of doing this job. Whether and the most patient of the Rusul of Allah, right? Alayhi salatu wasalam. Look at Nuh alayhi salam. It is a lifetime of da'wah, but it's also a lifetime of what? Sabr. Right? Because it required what he did, what he called for, led people to to insult him, to humiliate him, to be against him, and that necessitates sabr. And the lack of both of these things, when you're not calling to the truth, then there's no need for you to show or illustrate sabr. All this last component, if somebody doesn't do it, what is that a proof? What's missing? When they don't call to the truth, and of course then there's no need for sabr anyway. What is that a sign of? There's a lack of what? The first two conditions, iman and righteous deeds. Because until you yourself do righteous deeds, you will not see the ugliness of evil deeds. If you're not doing righteous deeds yourself, you don't see what the big deal is in doing bad things. But when you start you will know this for sure. Maybe you were a party animal before and you made tawbah and you started obeying Allah. When you start obeying Allah, you see somebody else partying, it bothers you. It hurts. It didn't hurt before, but now it hurts. How can they do that? I have to stop them. I made this mistake. I don't want them to make that mistake. It hurts you now. So the fact that it doesn't hurt, so you never feel the need to say, actually illustrates that you are not committed to good deeds. And if you're not committed to good deeds, it means you don't really have what? Iman. So all of these things are lazim wa malzoom. They are necessary consequences of each other and coherently connected with each other. I took a lot of extra time explaining this one surah. When we started from Surat An-Naba, it was one session each. But this session